All right. So this video, the standards we're assessing is 6, 7, and 8. So standard 6 is assessment. Obviously in the video, I'm not taking a video of myself getting a test or a quiz because that would be boring. But generally, and it's written in my lesson plan that I submitted, I have homework every night for math. So they obviously complain because we're probably like one of the only classes that gives homework consistently every night. Usually 2 quizzes per chapter, formative, and then 1 summative test.
That's perfect.
So every chapter is pretty much the same. What their question is how are we using our data to inform future instruction or review it with the kids? And so generally I have my tests or quizzes graded. So right here, I'm not sure what happened. When I got back from the meeting, I noticed that it totally cut out, and I think what happened is I got an incoming phone call and I was recording on my phone. But we had our full reflection meeting, and basically I only got a small portion of it on videotape. But in order to increase efficiency, I figured that I would just cover what we talked about in our reflection because I don't want to take up my mentor's time again redoing this meeting when it was my fault that the technology did not work due to an incoming call. So basically what we were talking about next was data collection, and what I talked about is that normally, I take the average and the median and kind of see where the class is at and what I need to go over the next day since I always have things graded the same day. Sometimes the class won't do well as a whole and I'll decide that I need to reteach and retest. So that happened with one of my algebra classes last week. They did not do well on their exam, so I had a couple buffer days built in which I retaught the lesson and then retested them. And I talked to Juby about this, and she said, it's good to kind of look at that in relation to what they need going forward. If it's kind of a topic that just stops there, maybe you don't need to retest, but a lot of the algebra topics flow into Algebra 2. So it's really important that they have that background knowledge in order to move forward into Algebra 2. We then talked about planning for instruction and making sure that I'm differentiating in the classroom. And Juby talked about, not only differentiating for the low students, but differentiating for the high students. So saying in class, for example, if you're done and you feel confident trying the next problems, go ahead and move on, even if you haven't totally covered what to do next. But sometimes those students who are ready for a challenge will be able to figure it out themselves. And that's a good way to differentiate there. And then talking about instructional strategies with Juby, we talked about implementing different resources into the lessons in order to develop high-order thinkers and basically facilitate all of the students learning throughout their particular needs. So what Juby talked about is different technologies that we can use in the classroom. And I typically don't use a ton of technology in the classroom because I find that it's somewhat distracting, or they're able to now text on their laptops. But we talked about different math apps like IXL that we can use, which allow the students to practice their math, and it works at their own pace. So for example, IXL, Juby said, is basically a format where if the students get it correct, it moves on to a harder problem, and if the students get it wrong, then it does a problem of the same sorts. So every student is then working at their own pace, and it kind of does the differentiation for you. We also talked about having students assess their own progress. So something that I created in line with a template that Juby had showed me a couple weeks back was kind of a self-reflection form of how the students think that they're doing in the class and what they think they can do better to improve their formative and summative scores. And I found that this helped them kind of refocus in class, and I also noticed that a lot of them realized that they need to start coming to office hours, and I've noticed a great increase in participation with that, which has been great. Juby also talked about giving the quizzes back right away and having the students correct their own quizzes, so not putting all the answers on the quizzes for them, but having the students correct their own quizzes. So all you do is mark it wrong and mark how many points off, and then they go in and fill the correct answers so that they're really remembering what went wrong and to not make those mistakes on the test.
So overall, that was all that was discussed in my reflection, and it was a good meeting. I think I learned a lot from it and what I can implement going forward, especially regarding technology and some kind of tools that I can use post assessments. But again, I just had a problem with the technology, speaking of, on this where it cut out because I got an incoming phone call. So that's basically what we covered in the reflection meeting.